Let me preface this by saying I am not a gamer, but like a lot of you out there, I too have been obsessed with Among Us. And honestly, I'm not even sorry for the way too many hours spent on the game. Unless you're still way too into Fall Guys, I'm sure you know what the game is about, but in case you don't, here's a quick summary. Among Us. A group of players come together, usually between 6 and 10. Most are crewmates while the other 1 or 2 are imposters. The crew have to do tasks to survive, and the imposters have to kill the crewmates either through gruesome murder or getting them voted off the ship. Imposters win when they equal the number of crew. Crew win when they eject all imposters or when they complete all tasks. Now, unless you're just too good of a person to kill off all your friends, chances are you've been hit by the Among Us bug just like I have. It's got this whole mafia werewolf vibe going on, and the whodunit question is just too appealing to ignore. Plus, who doesn't find these little guys adorable? You know, until one of them inexplicably turns on you and stabs its tongue sword through your skull, thus leaving you a half-eaten corpse. Still not quite sure what I should make of that. Anyway, it seems like everyone's been comparing Among Us with John Carpenter's The Thing, and I can totally see the reasons why. A shape-shifting alien disguised as an innocent member of the team of scientists so that he can pick them off one by one, thus leaving them all in a paranoia that they're going to be next. If that's not nightmare fuel, I don't know what is. But with Halloween just passed and plenty of scary movies and thrillers to watch, I had another thought. What if Among Us is actually Scream? Let me explain. In case you've somehow not watched the movie in the 24 years since it came out, man, has it really been that long? The basic premise is that there's a psycho who's a little too knife happy in the small, fictional town of Woodsboro, California. The plot kicks off with the deaths of Casey and Steve, 2 high schoolers who probably had other plans in mind. But hey, didn't we all back in 2019? The killer, dubbed Ghostface, goes all stabby stabby slash slash and goodbye to our new friends. Alas, you shall be missed. Then the film goes on to introduce the actual main characters, Sydney and co. We've got Sid's boyfriend, Billy, her BFF, Tatum, Tatum's boyfriend, Stu, and their other friend, Randy, who works in the film store and is kind of the odd man out. Then there's the town deputy, Dewey, whom, come on, don't you just love? And finally is Gail Weathers, news reporter extraordinaire trying to make it big in a small town. But I mean, come on, we've all been there, right? Now, as it turns out, the story takes place nearly a year after the tragic murder of poor Sid's mother, and the guy she testified against for her mother's death, Cotton, to put him away, is still making the news. Why, you may ask? Because Gail Weathers thinks he might not be the actual killer after all. Uh-oh, Sid. Make a mistake there, I see. Did you perhaps eject the wrong man from society? Anyway, thanks to the double murder in the beginning, the whole town's understandably on edge. They've instated a curfew, got cops patrolling the once peaceful streets, and thrown a party? Safety in numbers, I guess. And still, people keep dying. Students, Tatum, the principal, not that anyone seems to miss him, Gail's camera guy, and the whole time everybody starts to throw out names, throwing, shall I say, sus? Okay, so this is where the game comes in. Not only do the serial killers, spoilers there are 2, view the whole thing as some sort of movie or game, but it literally feels like playing Among Us. From the very beginning, we as a viewer are nearly as clueless as the characters in the film. With the first 2 kills, everyone who knew poor Casey and Steve are interrogated by the cops. Standard enough. But then we get to a scene with our main friends, and Stu starts to show off a little bit too much. You know, talking about gutting people and seeming totally blasé about it all. Suspicious much? We've got our eye on you, Stu. It also doesn't help that Stu may have had a motive for killing Casey. He used to date her, after all. But his current girlfriend, Tatum, vouches for him by saying he was with her. Randy asks if this was before or after he killed Casey, and the scene ends on an uneasy note. This, of course, is highly reminiscent of Among Us, where imposters get the crew to vouch for them to avoid getting voted off. Later that night, we get the first direct attack on Sydney. She's alone in her house, much as many innocent crewmates are when they're murdered. But okay, most killers go after people when they're alone, so I'll give them that. So Sid gets herself into a bit of a pickle when Ghostface tries to, kill her. She tries to call 911, but oh boy, the killers cut the phone, and this, again, is a parallel to Among Us. Sabotaging comms, anyone? Lucky for Sid, she has a workaround, and Ghostface disappears. Then, boo! Billy's behind her, climbing in her window. They hug, and isn't it just so sweet? But then he drops his cellular phone, the 90s, am I right, and sees suddenly sus of him. The cops show up, and because Billy's the only other person there, they take him away to interrogate him. Billy's dad comes to support him, but oh man, does the sus level grow when he finds out Billy snuck out the night of the murders to see Sid. Lucky for Billy, he manages to stick with the story, and even the cops decide it was a wrong place, wrong time kind of situation. Oh, Billy, you smart, calculating slasher, you. Aren't the best imposters always the quiet ones? Now, because of everything that's happened, everyone starts pairing up. Sydney goes to stay with her friend Tatum, who also happens to be the younger sister of Dewey, so he's around as well. Gale Weathers, trying to gather the story from the outside, gets close to Dewey, so they end up together a lot. Stu and Billy spend their time with other people too. Poor Randy, though. He has less and less of an alibi as the story goes on. And honestly, Randy kind of plays the role of third imposter throughout the film. He knows way too much and isn't really accounted for most of the time. So at Tatum's house, Ghostface calls Sid and tells her she's got the wrong guy, again. So I guess Billy's innocent? Less sus, at least. Because of this, Sid starts to doubt whether Cotton was actually a murderer or if he was framed. A classic case of false identification or, in Among Us terms, non-confirmed ejection. And with these new doubts, Sid has to wonder if perhaps the real killer is back. Now, because apparently murder isn't enough of a reason to cancel school, everyone reunites back at the high school. Billy startles Sydney and seriously just has the creepiest expression. But Sid knows by now it couldn't be him. Just like any good imposter, he commits to his story. And besides, there are plenty of other people to suspect at this time. Mr. Himbree, the school's principal, does seem pretty darn villainous until he later gets himself stabbed to death. Seriously, was the janitor deaf or did he do it? But hey, you know how it goes. You're an innocent crewmate over in storage when the kill is taking place in electrical, imposter vents, and you head in to find the dead body, and I can only assume Ghostface ditched his costume and went out the office window. Oh, and I forgot to mention this, but Sydney hides in the bathroom after seeing this face, and overhears some girls contemplating whether or not she's the one who killed Casey and Steve. You know, in Among Us, it's really not uncommon for the imposters to kill once or even twice and then self-report on their next victim. Maybe that's our Sid. School ends, the principal meets a sharp knife, and now we're at the film store with Randy and Stu being all buddy-buddy. I guess Billy's there too, but he's surrounded by a bunch of girls and, you guessed it, the horror section. Stu suggests Sid's father is the real killer. He's out of town, never checked into a hotel he was supposed to stay at, and he's just real suspicious. Plus, who leaves their teenage daughter alone at the anniversary of her mother's death? Honestly, he deserves a sus. Of course, Randy, being the expert he is, says there's a formula to his horror movie stuff, and that Sydney's dad is a red herring. The real killer? It's totally Billy. And, in classic jump scare fashion, Billy shows up right over Randy's shoulder. Shouldn't Randy have been able to sense his presence? Anyway, as creepy as can be, Billy and Stu try to throw sus on Randy, though this seems to be more for the audience at this point, since honestly, who actually believes it was Randy? He's got it bad for Sydney, for one. Why try to kill her and a bunch of other people? Unlike Billy and Stu over here, he actually seems well adjusted. Relatively. Fast forward to the ill-timed, ill-fated party. Gale shows up and Dewey sticks around as chaperone. Billy's the only one not invited, and Stu and Randy seem to be running the shindig. Stu asks Tatum for a beer. A beer. Aren't these like 17-year-olds? Anyway, and she departs. Alone. And I'm sure you know what that means. What happens when an innocent crewmate in Among Us goes off to another part of the ship without an ally? Yeah, so Tatum dies. Back inside, Stu and Sid are talking when guess who shows up? Billy, yay. Stu acts faux surprised to see him, and then Sid agrees to go upstairs with Billy to talk. They go have a nice heart-to-heart, where they both apologize, and Sydney says she knows she should move on, but come on, you gotta grieve when you gotta grieve, girl. They start making out, and oh my god, strands of their hair catch, and I thought, hey, Avatar sex. While this is going on, Gale is watching the party from her van outside with her cameraman. You see, sneaky Gale over here managed to drop off her little camera in the living room, and now has her own version of security, though on a 30-second delay. Just as limited in scope, though. So she gets to see Randy, Stu, and a bunch of other partygoers get sloshed and hang out. So relaxed, these people, I swear. Even crewmates tend to get spooked by this point in the game. Enough with the emergency button already. I know you're sus of me, but you didn't actually see me kill Blue. That was my partner, jeez. So Stu goes off on his own to, quote, get a beer. Dewey gets a lead on a mysterious parked car that might belong to Sydney's dad, so he gets Gale to accompany him, thereby leaving the cameraman alone in the van. And then Randy gets the call that their principal is dead. So all the other unnamed mooks leave, and he just kind of lays on the couch, still pretty drunk. Dewey and Gale find Sydney's dad's car in the woods, which means he's either definitely sus or in some serious trouble. And it's at this point that I was like, could Dewey be the imposter? Sorry, I mean killer? But then I saw his sweet face and was like, nah. The dad does seem pretty sus, though, especially since, as it turns out, the creepy calls the killer's been making came from his phone. So sus. And just as an aside here, but have any of you played Among Us with self-proclaimed detectives or sheriffs? This is just like that, except in Scream, that's their actual job. Oh, and I guess reporters. Back in the upstairs bedroom with Sid and Billy, Sid's kind of suspicious of Billy again, though at this point I don't really see what the point of it is, and Billy turns the tables back by asking if she's really still doubting him. And before she can say what she really should say, Ghostface comes in and stabs him to death. Welp, bye Billy. At this point, the only people who are unaccounted for are Stu and Randy. Sid manages to get outside, after a fashion, and sees Tatum's dead body. The scene shifts to Randy, who, it appears, is about to be offed by Ghostface. But then Ghostface hears Sydney outside and goes after her instead. Lucky break, Randy. Sid gets to the cameraman, who is promptly murdered, and man, we're really running out of innocence here, aren't we? It's just like that feeling you get when you're crew and you know there's one imposter left, but there are 4 people in total and nobody really quite knows who to trust. I guess we know we can trust the dead guys at least. And maybe Randy? Dewey and Gail are on their way back, and Gail goes to call for backup while Dewey heads inside the house. Coming from nowhere, Randy startles Gail, so she hits him with her phone and does some really stupid... So she's down for the count. Now, since Sid failed to get help, she runs back to the house, because I guess she knows Ghostface isn't inside anymore? Oh, and Dewey's been stabbed, by the way, so I guess he's dead now. Seriously, we're just picking them off at this point. Ghostface tries once again to get all stabby-stabby on Sid, but she avoids it, and then BAM! Stu and Randy show up, both seemingly hurt, both blaming each other for the killings. Gosh, this reminds me of that time I played Among Us as crew, and there was this one imposter and one other crewmate left, but the imposter was just so convincing I didn't know who to believe. Anyway, Sid opts to lead them both outside, which, let's be honest, is probably the safest bet. And suddenly, Billy comes falling down the stairs. So dramatic, Billy. Trusting him completely at this point, Sid gives him the gun she picked up along the way, and then they open the front door. Stu's vanished, but Randy comes in and Billy shoots him. Stu comes back inside and Sid turns to him for help before realizing, wait a second, there are 2 of them? Oh, and Billy was the one who killed Sid's mother, so Cotton really was a false eject. So I guess that's the reveal? Now, in the game, the imposters don't really have much of a motive for killing crew from what I can tell, but Stu and Billy do pull a classic Among Us move and decide the best way to get away with murder is to injure each other and seem totally innocent. At this point, it's looking pretty grim for our innocence, but then it turns out that not only is Sid's dad still alive, but so is Gail. 2 imposters, 3 crewmates. The numbers work. Okay, long story short, Sid and allies kill the imposters and the game is won. And seriously, at one point, Sid even messes with Stu by asking if he wants to play a game after she's taken her dad and hid. At the end of it all, it turns out Dewey and Randy are also both still alive, but seeing as they were out of commission, I don't really count them. And Sid does get rid of Stu first, but by this time Gail is also out of the game, leaving Billy versus Sid and Dad. And, as in all the best Among Us games, it's a close call. As in the Among Us game, when the imposters win or nearly win, the Ghostface duo did so well because they'd already ingratiated themselves with the gang. Why would you suspect your boyfriend or your bestie's boyfriend after all? But then again, someone's killing people. Could it be someone you know? Honestly, I think Stu and Billy could still have gotten away with it if they'd been a little bit smarter with their planning, but hey, we can't all be 3,000 IQ imposters now, can we?